Theresa May says opposites attract as she sets out her stall ahead of a big meeting with Donald Trump. The Prime Minister will be the first world leader to meet the President, but what will the new special relationship look like? Also this lunchtime, she'll never have her first day at school. Her mother's pain at the carelessness which led to a tipper truck tragedy. Tesco to merge with the UK's biggest wholesaler, but this new food giant could affect prices for everyone. And
Mr. Declan Donnelly for services to broadcasting and to entertainment.
Ant and Deg on picking up their fourth award of the week, but this time with a royal seal of approval.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Charlene White.
Good afternoon. Theresa May's begun her visit to the United States, which will culminate this evening with a meeting with Donald Trump. She's hoping to capitalise on being the first foreign leader to visit Mr. Trump's White House, potentially at the front of a queue for a potential trade deal. But there are those questioning the wisdom of her visit, particularly given the new president's controversial views on terrorism, women and immigration. As she arrived, she dismissed the criticism, arguing that sometimes opposites attract. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports with a new look to the special relationship.
Theresa May arrived in Washington last night for a meeting at the White House this morning that may be among the most unpredictable Anglo-American encounters in decades. Shortly before noon local time, she will be the first leader to meet Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Yesterday's speech in Philadelphia was an attempt to emphasize the importance of NATO and the threat of Russia, a worldview the American president shows no sign of sharing.
With President Putin, my advice is to engage, but beware.
But Mrs. May is also trying to read the mood of the Trump White House and expressed her support for his deep skepticism of interventions anywhere in the world.
The days of Britain and America intervening in sovereign countries in an attempt to remake the world in our own image are over.
The two will meet today for the first time to discuss a range of topics from trade.
US networks have focused both on the issues and on a protocol blunder.
The White House misspelling May's first name in its official schedule, but quickly sending out a correction.
But the Prime Minister will be arriving at a White House that is fighting multiple fires in its opening days. Currently, there is a furious row with Mexico after Trump signed executive orders on immigration and the wall, fueled by the president's provocative insistence that Mexico will pay for it. There is now talk of a destructive trade war.
This playing guy, Trump, has brought back a very strong Mexican spirit, and we're ready for the trade war. We're ready, of course, for not paying that wall.
And last night, the president again provided Americans with a bizarre performance in which he launched further attacks on the press.
Honestly, it's fake news. It's fake.
He continued to obsess about the size of his inauguration crowds.
I had the largest audience, if you add the television, you add all the sources, the largest audience in the history of inaugurations. I did.
And he appeared again to support the torture of suspected terrorists.
I will tell you, though, it works. And I just spoke to people who told me it worked, and that's what they do.
With the British ambassador sitting next to her, Theresa May headed into Washington last night to prepare for a White House meeting that has opportunity and risk written all over it. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Well, this lunchtime, the Prime Minister is beginning her visit by paying tribute to those who lost their lives fighting for our freedoms. She's at the Arlington War Memorial in Virginia. You can just see her there standing outside the front of her car. Later on, she'll be laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown warrior. Well, our political editor, Robert Peston, is there in Arlington for us. Robert, can you talk us through exactly what's going to happen today?
Well, as you said, in just a few moments, she will be laying a wreath here at Arlington at the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. There's much pomp and ceremony. She is being welcomed here in a way that really only happens for America's more special friends, government heads that are regarded as close allies of America. And it paves the way for those all-important talks with Donald Trump, which will begin at midday. And then something which will be very gripping, a press conference when we will see, the world will see Theresa May and Donald Trump shoulder to shoulder for the first time. And we'll all be trying to get a sense of, whether they're really getting on.
Well, as you said, this is the first time that Theresa May will be meeting Donald Trump. She's the first world leader to do so. But that does come with its own dangers, though, doesn't it?
So what she's going to be looking for today is some progress on removing trade barriers between the two countries, although a formal trade deal can't be formally completed till we're out of the EU. She's also anxious that he isn't supportive enough of NATO and may be getting a bit too close to President Putin. There are widespread concerns, but particularly in Europe, that Putin will attempt to expand his influence in the countries of the former Soviet Union. And there is deep concern that were there to be an attack on a Baltic state, that America would not intervene. So she will want commitments on all of that, and therefore this is a very big moment for Britain in establishing a relationship that is really all to do with the future prosperity and stability of the world.
OK, Robert, thank you very much. The mother of a 4-year-old girl who died when a lorry went out of control in Bristol has described her family's loss today as heartbreaking. Mitzi Steady was hit by the truck, which had faulty brakes, last February. She died along with 3 other people. Statements from all the families were read out in court today, where 2 men will be sentenced for manslaughter after failing to carry out proper safety checks on the vehicle. Our correspondent Rupert Evelyn has more.
Her love, laughter and singing, which delighted us all, no longer fills every corner of our home. Words written and read in court by Mitzi Steady's mother, Emma Jade. She said, "My husband and I are heartbroken that Mitzi will not get to live her life to the fullest. We are devastated that our bright, lively, beautiful, vibrant, outgoing little girl will never have her first day at school, learn to read, have best friends to giggle and play with. The list is endless." Sian Vaughan had only been married for 6 months. Through tears, she told the court of the horror of learning of the death of her husband, Steve. She said nothing, no punishment or words, would compensate for her loss. Phil Allen's wife and daughter described being absolutely heartbroken and hoped that those responsible would realise the devastation they have caused. Robert Parker had been with his wife for 42 years. Denise Parker said she feels terribly saddened at the pointless waste of life and the hurt and pain she now lives with. Matthew Gordon, the company owner, he ignored the most basic road safety rules and was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter. Peter Wood, the mechanic who paid little or no attention to the deadly truck, also convicted of manslaughter. When their company Grittenham Haulage had its licence revoked after the fatal crash, the Traffic Commissioner found it to have committed 124 offences over 15 weeks. The firm, it was said, put commercial concerns first, with compliance a poor second, and only made an effort to change once their truck had killed 4 people. Well, the court has heard from the lawyers for the 2 convicted men. In mitigation, Matthew Gordon's lawyer said that he had acceptance throughout the trial that the lorry was in an unsafe or dangerous condition. And in a letter to the court, Gordon said he had been working too hard, driving all the time. He let things get away from him. Peter Wood's lawyer said, why would he have got into the lorry if he believed there was something wrong with it? Both men will be sentenced and have been warned that they face time inside in about half an hour's time.
OK, Rupert, thanks very much. Britain's biggest supermarket has bought Britain's biggest food wholesaler. Tesco announced today that it struck a deal with the Booker Group for £3.7 billion after a year-long negotiation. But smaller independent stores who rely on Booker fear prices could go up as a result. Well, let's speak to our consumer editor, Chris Troy, who's in central London for us. Chris, just how significant is this deal?
Well, just look at the scale of it. As you say, we are talking about Britain's biggest food retailer merging with Britain's biggest food wholesaler. That creates a whole new food giant in Britain's food supply chain. And I can tell you this lunchtime, there's a bit of a mix. There are cheers and jeers for those who support the business sense of this deal and those that worry about its implications. Let me show you my graphic and talk you through the basics of this deal. As you say, it's worth £3.7 billion. It's massive. Booker, the wholesaler, has 1.3 million wholesale customers. And significantly, Booker also owns the Budgens, Londis and Premier Stores brands. It would merge with Tesco, of course, Britain's largest retailer, now with over 3,500 stores and 310,000 workers.
Well, as you said, Chris, it creates this food giant. So what have Tesco's rivals had to say about this?
As you can imagine, there is some concern about this new potential concentration of commercial power in the food market. The people that are most likely to be concerned are those that own small, independent grocery stores. Many of them are supplied by Booker. They now fear that their wholesale supply could be influenced by their biggest rival, i.e. Tesco. However you look at this, it could create a whole new food force. Interestingly, so far, the competition officials have remained silent. We don't expect that to last for very long.
OK, Chris, thanks very much. Still to come. And without deck, both have picked up OBEs, but they meet Prince Charles one by one. We'll find out how they took the split. The number of cancelled operations in England is up by more than a quarter in the space of 2 years. New figures also show NHS trusts issued more than 200 crisis alerts throughout the winter and had patients diverting from 2 full A&E departments. Our political correspondent Paul Brand reports.
When you go in hospital for an operation, you think you're going to have one.
Cancer treatment keeps Bruce Knight's diary pretty full, save for the last-minute cancellations. Twice he's been booked to have a tumour urgently removed from his pancreas, and twice he's been stood down, even while ready and waiting in hospital.
The reason they're operating is because it stayed within that tumour on the pancreas. If it was to go anywhere else, lungs, kidneys or whatever, might be a different story and might not be able to operate. So, yeah, you're very apprehensive and that it's still there.
University Hospitals Coventry and Warwickshire NHS Trust has apologised to Mr Knight, pointing to high demand. But figures out today show across England 4,093 operations were cancelled last year, up significantly on the 3,779 in 2015 and an even bigger rise on the 3,216 the year before that. The figures come as doctors in the Midlands consider only doing knee and hip operations if patients are in too much pain to sleep, in a bid to save money. As NHS England admits, rising demand is creating huge pressure.
For those individual people that have had their operations cancelled, I really do apologise for that. It's an awful thing to happen to an individual, but we know that organisations, doctors, nurses, hospital managers are working incredibly hard to make sure those patients get treated as soon as they possibly can.
Bruce Knight's booked his operation again for February. Too important to just hope it's third time lucky when his health can't take the misfortune of having things cancelled again.
Paul, is the government recognising the current pressures on the NHS?
Well, the government says it does, which is why it's investing an extra £10 billion in the NHS, but we're hearing time and time again this winter that just doesn't seem to be enough. In fairness, pressure on A&E services has eased over the past month, though it's still double what it was this time last year. I asked the Prime Minister's spokesman earlier what she would say to a patient like Bruce Knight in my report there, who is waiting in pain or in anxiety about their operation. I was told that is a matter for the doctors, and the Labour Party certainly think the government could show a bit more heart here. They're calling for more investment in the NHS. Of course, there is no magic money tree, as the Conservatives would argue, but week in, week out, we're seeing these statistics about the NHS, and more people are asking what other solution there really is.
Paul, thank you. A report has recommended that the Church of England should not change its stance on opposing same-sex marriage, but should adopt a culture of welcome and support for gay people. It says church law should be interpreted in a way that provides homosexuals maximum freedom. Detectives investigating historical allegations of abuse related to football have arrested a 70-year-old man from Cambridge. He's being held on suspicion of indecency with children and indecent assault. And the Queen has carried out her first public appearance of the year. She visited the special exhibition on the culture and art of Fiji at the University of East Anglia. Now, psychologists have found that girls as young as 6 may already have developed a bias to believe men are better than women. The US-based study has been trying to find out how young gender bias develops. In the experiment, boys and girls who were 5 years old both associated brilliance with their own gender. But by the age of 6, girls had switched and believed that men were the smarter sex. But the boys still stuck with their original answer. Well, the gender divide is a familiar tale to viewers of the Channel 4 show The Secret Life of 5-year-olds. Take a look at this.
What's the best thing about being a boy?
We are super smart and super cool and super handsome.
What else is it about boys that makes them better?
They wear awesome clothes and they are just so awesome.
What's the best thing about girls?
They are more gentle and kind. And boys are smelly. Girls have bigger brains than boys.
Well, psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Kilby was an expert on the show and joins us this lunchtime. Thanks so much for coming in. Now, when we talk about brilliance when it comes to 6-year-olds and girls believing perhaps that boys are more brilliant when they're that age, is that what you found in your experience?
Well, before working on the show, I might have resisted gender stereotypes a bit more strongly. But what was really amazing to me when we looked at the boys and girls separately was how quickly the groups moved towards more conventional gender stereotypes. And it made me realise we need to start thinking a lot more about this issue.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Should we be worried about this at all?
Well, it's a complicated subject because although the research in America did show that girls at 6 were more likely to say the boys were brilliant, the research paper also showed, by age 6 or 7, the girls were likely to predict they were going to be more academically successful. So I'm not entirely sure we've worked out what having a gender stereotype means. I think there's a lot more work to be done.
I mean, and who should be doing that work? Is that our schools or is it parents? Perhaps do we need more positive role models at primary school, for example?
Well, I think we need to better understand the issue. Having a gender stereotype is now clearly evident. We showed it on the show and there is research to back this up. What we're not clear about is what it means. And this is a question for parents, for me as psychologists, but also as wider society, because we need to learn better where these children are getting their views from to really understand what it means.
And in terms of what it means, will that then have an impact? I know that there's a big push on getting more girls involved in STEM subjects, that's science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Do you think that once we understand why it happened, perhaps we can see more girls going into those sorts of industries?
Well, what the show showed was that it is really multifactorial. Looking at children as an individual, we can get their views. What we noticed was they were influencing each other so heavily, and I don't think that's something as researchers we've thought enough about before. And it does lead us to think, if we're teaching children in single-sex or same-sex groups, what does that mean about the narrative they're building about themselves as a group? Because that might be a strong predictor of where they're going in the future.
So do you think this is something that we'll eventually, in time, be able to figure out? So perhaps we see ourselves as being more equal when we're 5 years old?
Well, I think only time is going to tell on this one.
All right, Elizabeth, thank you so much. And finally, they've been at the top of their game for years, and today Ant and Dec were given OBEs by Prince Charles for services to broadcasting and entertainment. It's capped a magnificent week for the pair after they were named the UK's best presenters at the National Television Awards for the 16th time in a row. Well, today's ceremony took place at Buckingham Palace. Our correspondent Richard Pallet was there.
Well, they're as close to TV royalty as there is, and today the real royalty in the shape of Prince Charles gave you OBEs. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There they are.
Look at that.
Pretty smart.
Oh, we're honestly thrilled.
Chuffed a bit. Over the moon.
What a day.
What's it like to get an OBE for services to entertainment? It's a daft thing to say.
It's a daft thing to hear. No, it's brilliant. I mean, the whole day has been wonderful, and Charles was great when we stepped up and we had a good chat, and because we're ambassadors for the Prince's Trust as well, so he thanked us for that on our ongoing contribution, and yeah, he had a big smile on his face. He was pleased to see us, even after the documentary. He was pleased to see us.
Not as big as the smiles we had on our faces, I think.
Yeah.
It's been quite a surreal week with the National Television Awards the other night and now this today. It's kind of, we're both kind of floating on air, really.
Yeah. You're famously never seen apart. You went up separately today?
Yes,
we
you
did,
went first.
and I went first. It's always Ant and Dec. So Ant's name's always first, and today I got to go first.
Finally Dec, then Ant.
Finally, I shook him off for all of 5 minutes.
It's ruined my day.
What was it like being second?
No, I didn't mind. I went first a lot, so yeah, I didn't mind at all. I watched what were you doing, you see?
Yeah.
And the week has been topped off, I guess, with the 16th NTA Presenter of the Year Award. Yeah. 16 years.
Yeah.
It's mad.
I mean, look, the whole week's just a bit crazy, if I'm honest with you. So, and it's back to work tomorrow on Britain's Got Talent, so we've got no time to kind of sit and enjoy. Apart from today.
We are going to take these to show Simon Cowell, because I don't think he's got one.
Oh, he hasn't, has he?
No, so we're going to take these, just to rub his nose in it a little bit.
Look at that, Cowell. There you are. That's as close as he's going to get.
What would the boys from Biker Grove make of this?
God, I think they wouldn't believe you. If we could go back and speak to them and say, 2017, you're going to be at Buckingham Palace getting an OBE, they would have laughed us out the Grove. But no, we're so honoured and humbled and thrilled and ecstatic.
Oh, I'm sure Simon Cowell will love them showing off their OBEs. Well, of course, that was Ant and Dec celebrating their OBEs with our correspondent Richard Pallet. A huge congratulations, boys, from all of us here. Right, that's it from us this lunchtime. I'll be back with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But from all of us here on the lunchtime team, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Goodbye.